Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to you and the ranking member for having this hearing today, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Enright, in your testimony, you described transparency, user control, portability, and security as Google's main privacy values. I am disturbed, though, by reports that Google is currently working on a search engine for China that would conform with the rigid censorship requirements of the Chinese regime. What's even more troubling is that the search engine would apparently link users' searches to their personal phone numbers, both making it easier for the Chinese government to track and monitor its citizens and to develop their so-called social credit scores, where citizens can be denied any number of things from travel to access to school. 14 leading human rights organizations have called on your company to cease its work on this search engine, and a number of our colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, have called on Google to provide additional answers to Congress, yet the company has yet to provide those answers. How will Google square its stated privacy values with this flawed Chinese search engine and the very real possibility that it may be used to repress human rights?
Thank you for the question, Senator. First, I would like to say that I take pride in Google's record on human rights. I stand by our long and track record in living by our values and launching products and services that reflect and are consistent with those values. With that said, I am aware of the reporting that you reference, and I will say that my understanding is that we are not, in fact, close to launching a search product in China, and whether we would or could at some point in the future remains unclear. If we were, in fact, to finalize a plan to launch a search product in China, my team would be actively engaged. Our privacy and security controls would be followed, and any such project or product would follow and be consistent with our values around privacy and data protection as I've described them here today.
So where do you think these reports are coming from?
I wouldn't speculate, Senator.
Okay, I would look forward to continued dialogue, and I think it would be in Google's interest to respond to the inquiries from members of Congress about what kind of work you're doing with China and whether you are even contemplating building a tool that could be used by a totalitarian regime to repress human rights. I'd like to move on now with a question again to Mr. Enright and to Mr. Kieran. This is a really interesting panel because we have big businesses from internet service providers to online platforms to device manufacturers and retailers all here. I hope very much that Chairman Thune and Ranking Member Nelson will host another hearing on this topic where we can also hear from consumer and public interest groups to learn even more. One issue that I raised with Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook when he testified before this committee is that when your company's business models rely on maximizing the amount of time people spend on your products and monetizing people's data, it's simply not possible for us to trust that your companies will make the changes needed to protect America's well-being and privacy. Mr. Zuckerberg committed to working with Congress to develop ways of protecting consumer and constituent privacy and well-being, even if that results in some laws that will require adjustments to your business models. Will Google and Twitter make the same commitments here today?
Senator, we remain committed to working with this committee and with Congress more generally, as well as more broadly with legislators, regulators, and policymakers to ensure that appropriate privacy protections and data protection protections continue to exist and continue to evolve and iterate to address new and changing threats that come to face our services and our users. We believe that trust is absolutely paramount to the long-term success of our business, and it's the right thing to do.
Well, thank you for that. I want to hear from Mr. Kieran. Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I would echo what Mr. Enright said, and I would add that at Twitter, the primary goals or objectives at the company at the moment are health and data protection and privacy. We take those very seriously. Everybody touches upon those concerns at the company. We believe they're not only key to keeping the people's trust who use our services, but also showing good responsibility with respect to where our place is in the world. We welcome the opportunity to work with you and your staff and the committee on those initiatives.
Well, I appreciate those answers, but I do have to tell you, and I'll look forward to following up with further questions, there is a basic disconnect here. You can be as well-intended as possible, but if your business model drives a particular set of behaviors and the monetizing of people's data, for instance, and keeping them online, and your business model and your responsibility to your shareholders is one thing, and the needs of the public and consumers is another thing, it may behoove you to work with us to come up with a regulatory scheme, as Mr. Zuckerberg committed to do, that removes some of that conflict. Because at the end of the day, if your business model is driving you in one direction, all your good intentions may not help consumers who really are demanding it. Thank you for letting me go over, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator